Here's our new oil pan gasket from Victor Rines. Victor was kind enough to send me... What was that? Oh, that's not a guy? But what I bet you did not know is that the M54B30 also eats guides. I hope you can see that. Welcome to my basement. It is particularly oppressive in my garage these days. Well, oh my god! That wasn't it. Unfortunately, we have a parts issue. Last time I was using this dingus, it broke. Oh, that broke. Just kidding about that last part. Welcome back, friends, to another episode of Skelly's Garage. My name is Sam. Behind me is the Grey Lady. This is an M54 that I've been rebuilding for quite some time, which is why this is part 8 of the Grey Lady rebuild. If you're just tuning in, take a look at the previous episodes there. And if this is not your first time, let's continue. We have this new engine, which I still need to put back together with parts from that engine, which is out of the camera, so that it can go into this car, so that I can get this car out of the garage and then do literally all of my other projects that are waiting on me. So as I mentioned in a previous episode, the reason that I haven't put this engine back together already is because there are parts from the old engine that I needed, such as the flywheel, which is helpful for timing the engine, the oil pump, which is helpful for oiling the engine, and the oil pan, which is helpful to contain the oil inside the engine, and a few other bits and bobs that, you know, either I didn't like the way that they looked on this engine or just didn't come on this one. So let's begin. The first thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to put back this sprocket. When I took this off, I was actually wrong. Looks like the side that does not have a thick border is the side that faces the engine. The side that has a thick border faces the outside. Yes, it's incorrect. Turns out the sprocket is bidirectional, so it literally does not matter whether you put it on this way or this way. And in fact, I am going to reuse the sprocket that came on this engine rather than the sprocket that was on the engine originally, because this has a genuine BMW part number. That one doesn't. So I don't know what the story is. When dealing with internal engine components, it's important to have two things always be at hand. Number one, the parts that you're installing should be clean. This is clean. Number two, you should use some oil or lubricant. I'm using oil because I want to. Anyway, there we go. Should slide on nicely and fit in place. Excellent. Before I continue on that side, I'd like to fully tighten the bearings on both the main bearings and the rod bearings, because I didn't do that for some reason when I was working on this a few months ago. So let's do that now. Do the same thing for the connecting rods. Wait, that's it. Okay, so the bottom end is all torqued up, which means that we can start putting together the timing case, and that means timing guides. Now, if you're a fan of BMWs, your first association with the phrase timing chain guide is probably their failure as it relates to the M62, especially the TU, technical update. That engine is what I have in FAF and many other people have in their 740s and 540s and, well, a lot of cars. I don't want to say the guides aren't really a problem, because they are. If BMW had decided to make them out of like a polymer rather than peanut butter, it would have probably lasted longer on those cars and wouldn't be so well known as an issue. But what I bet you did not know is that the M54B30 at 270,000 miles also eats guides. This is the tensioning guide that came out of the M54 that was in the X5. Remember that that engine had 270,000 miles. This is a Bosch BMW part, has both Bosch and BMW, and it's broken because I had to break it to take it out. While I cracked it in half, I did not do this. I hope you can see that. When I took the oil pump off the engine off camera, I noticed that there was a bunch of guide in the pickup screen, so that's why. Anyway, we have new parts. Timing chain guides from Schaeffler and from Febi, or perhaps Febi and Schaeffler. This one is from INSTA/Schaeffler. This one is from Febi. Together they will do their job as timing chain guides and guide the timing chain. The guides sit on top of the timing case using these two little numbers. They are called timing chain guide pins. So one of them is the big one, and then you have two smaller ones. The big one goes right here, and that is what we put our tensioning timing guide on. I don't know if that's its official name, because I think BMW just calls them both engine timing guides, but this is the one that gets pushed by the tensioner, so that's why I'm calling it the tensioning timing guide. Screw that in, and then the other one. There are two of them, so one goes here, and the other one goes in here. Now BMW doesn't actually give you torque values for this, which I do find strange. Oh, that wasn't it. This timing chain guide pin doesn't have a torque listed, so I looked on the internet and the general consensus was that this should be able to handle around 47 Newton meters of torque. Obviously it didn't, so now I have to buy a new one of these, but I also have to figure out how to get this old one out. Oh, luckily that's actually not a problem. I guess that one was not in particularly good shape anyway. That was really easy, actually. That sucks, because these are really hard to find. I think they might be in LA. Anyway, I don't even know what to do with these. They're supposed to be super light torque, so let me see if I can make that happen. You know what? I'm not going to torque this. And I'll explain why in a second once I actually... Now that I've adjusted that, here's what actually happened. As I showed you, there are two timing chain guides. The first one is this rail that goes here, and this one doesn't move. The second one is the tensioning guide, which connects to this pin, and this is the pin that broke off. So, I guess I need to go find another one of these. I couldn't find this originally, the one that I took off this engine, and so that's why I actually scavenged it from the old engine. Maybe I can find it now, though. Anyway, these are now attached. They are tight, and I'm not going to try to go any harder on them because I don't want to wind up with even more broken pins, guide pins. Haha! Success! I found another one. Just gonna tighten it down until it basically stops and not much more. Install the timing guide. Okay, let's go get some chains. Unfortunately, we have a parts issue. So I went to go get the chain, and this is the chain that came out of the engine, and I wasn't planning on reusing this. And so then I went to go find the chain that I bought to replace it, and it turned out that it got super, super rusty, which is weird. They shouldn't do that. I don't really know why. As I've said before, it rains in here. Maybe it got rained on. So either way, I'm not sure that I have an acceptable timing chain to put onto this engine. I could obviously roll the dice and put on this chain, but given the state of some of the other stuff that was on this engine, I mean the main bearings for one and the rod bearings, like I said, I think this engine has about 140,000 miles on it. Why would I reuse a chain? This is very cheap insurance and conversely a very expensive mistake. So I'm gonna find another chain. After ordering the new timing chain, I decided that I would make myself feel better and fill the time by cleaning the varnish from the inside of the timing case. Alright, it's been a few days and we're back. Here's the new oil pump chain, and I have the new timing chain there as well. They're both made by Ivis. From everything that I've been able to read and see, Ivis makes good chains, so here we go. Okay, and on the other end is the sprocket, which we'll put on once it's time. Now that we've put on the oil pump chain, let's put on the timing chain. There we go. I've clipped this into the timing guide here just because I don't want it to be constantly slipping and sliding in and out of the way. Next, it was time to clean up the timing case, remove the old front main seal, and get it ready for reassembly. Here's the timing case. It's all cleaned up. I even took the seal out, which I showed you. It's time now to put the gaskets on it and put it back on the engine, and then we can install the new front main seal. Our new gaskets are made by L-Ring, so they are pretty good quality. Now the way that BMW recommends that you put this on is you apply a little bit of grease to these points here, then slap the gaskets on, and then put it onto the engine. I could do that, but I'm going to do the Stretton method instead. What that is you take the gasket and you put it onto the timing case, and then we take a zip tie it through, and that holds it in place. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, now let's put on the timing case. Now that we've attached the timing case with a few bolts, we can cut these zip ties and pull them out, and then put the rest of the bolts in. Now let's put the rest of the bolts in. I'm just going to tighten them to just taut, and then I'm going to torque them. torque them up. Okay, that's done. I actually really like this 1/4-inch torque wrench. It's just really nice. Now that the timing case is on and everything is torqued, there are 2 dowels actually. One right here and one right here that I just need to put in. Now that the timing cover is all torqued up and everything is all set, it's time to put in the new front crankshaft seal. Just like that. Make sure that it's clean and you apply a little bit of oil to the outside of the edge here. In general, there are not that many seals that you should put in dry. Anyway, this goes in just like that. I'm just lightly tapping around the sides just to seat the seal. Then I'm going to see if I can use this socket to drive it in all the way. There we go. That's the job done. Now that that's done, I'm going to go home because I have a function to go to, but I'll see you in a bit. We are very close to finally saying goodbye to this engine. That M54, which is just out of frame, is the M54 we're going to put back into the X5. But first we need to strip this of all useful things, clean some things up, and then get going. Let's do that. So one thing I didn't get on the donor engine is an oil pump. So we need to take this one off, clean it up a bit, see if it needs any additional assistance, and then subsequently mount it on that engine. Now that we have these bolts loose, let's take off the chain here. The tricky thing with this one, it's a right-hand thread. Then we slip that little guy off. I'm just going to wind this nut back on. Then this should come out, and it does. Great, let's get it over to the bench, where I have no space. Okay. I guess this is kind of a baffle. It's not really. A baffle would have been built into the oil pan, but I don't know. Whatever this plate is, let's take this out. It's just 8 13mm bolts. Oh, there's also a 10mm right here. All right, so there are a couple more things that we need from this engine, and one of them is this crank pulley. If you remember, my Craftsman gun was struggling for quite a while. Let's see what the new Milwaukee gun does. Ready, steady, go. Wow. That was crazy. That was like literally a second. So if you're taking off crank bolts, this is the way to go. Cool. These are different. This is the pulley from the X5. This is the pulley that came from the donor engine. This pulley has more holes along the top, which I don't think it's really consequential because more than likely they're drilled there for balancing because there is no sensor along the front of this engine. However, the donor engine AC pulley has 4 ribs. The X5's AC pulley has 3 ribs. If I'm going to be transferring the X5 stuff onto the donor engine, which I am, it needs to have the X5's crank pulley. The other thing is, and this one's a little bit more obvious, is that they have different part numbers. So that settles it. That's why we're using this one and not the one that came off the engine in the first place. Anyway, that's that sorted. Now it is finally time to start putting this head back together. To be perfectly honest, I could probably just take all the valves now that I've cleaned them off a little bit and put them in and they will probably be fine. But if I'm being honest, probably fine just doesn't cut it for me anymore. I don't want to do this job on this engine again, so we are not going to be okay with probably fine. And so I'm going to lap the valve. Now here's an intake valve. It goes into the intake side. But if you look closely, and well, I know that you can't from there, so I'll just add it in later, you'll see that this valve actually has not just one angle on it, but 3. And that's because of the way the valves are designed to work against the valve seat, which is this bit of hardened metal inside the cylinder head. The reason that we lap the valves is to make sure that any sort of imperfections or burrs or anything like that that have formed over the course of the operation of this engine go away. That will allow us to be confident that we'll have a perfect seal once we have this engine back together. I don't want these valves leaking. I don't want to do this again. So let's do it. I'll show you how it's done. First, I'm just going to clean the valve to make sure that there's no residue on it. we need to take this compound, which is valve grinding compound from Permatex, and apply it to the valve head. I think this is called the valve head. There's a really, really important thing that we can't overlook here. Absolutely none of this paste should make it anywhere other than the head of the valve and the valve seat. It should never ever make it into the valve guide, because if it makes it into the valve guide, it's gonna tear it up. So let's make sure it doesn't. Even it out with my high-tech applicator, which is a match. Attach it to the plunger, and let's go. You can't just do it in one direction because then you'll make grooves in the valve seat. So I'm gonna pick it up and rotate it a few times. Basically, we do this until we notice that the sound changes, and that's why we know that it's pretty much done. I really want to make this like a nice clean edge. It's not yet, but it's getting there. There wasn't really a ton of pitting on this valve to begin with, but any pitting that was there is now gone. It's been ground out. Let's remove the paste from the valve seat. Being careful and methodical here. Just gonna clean it. I always use a fresh paper towel when I clean the stem. I mean, that's the process, so I'm just gonna do that 20 more times. Welcome to my basement. It is particularly oppressive in my garage these days, so I figured, why not just take the head, bring it home, and do things here? And so that's what we're doing. Anyway, we need to lap these valves. There are 24 valves to lap, and I've already done 8 of them, so there are 16 remaining. Here's what it looks like before, and this is what it looks like afterwards. Excellent. The valve seat looks fantastic now. There's no surface rust or anything on that anymore, so we are in good shape. Now I just need to clean this valve off and back into the cylinder head it goes, and then we continue and do this 15 more times. With that done, let's flip the head over and hope that these valves don't all fall out. They won't have. Everything's organized. You should do that. There are 3 things that go on top of each one of these valves before. Thankfully, I caught my would-be mistake before I actually had the chance to make it. I put the valves in, I lapped the valves. Everything's peachy. I've got all the hardware. But if I put it together just like that, it would leak like a sieve. And that's because it doesn't have any valve stem seals, which you do want. You do want to have those. Those are pretty critical. I guess I'll go get those, right? I mean, what else am I doing, you know? See you in a bit. I'm back, and I have valve stem seals. Now the way to install these is, like, exceptionally simple. You take a valve stem seal, you apply a little bit of oil onto it, and since our head is off the engine, we really don't need to do anything more than that. And then just slide it on. They come with this little tool, which you can slide over the valve, and then slide over the valve stem seal over that, and then take it off. It's a little bit easier, I guess. And you don't run into the potential issue of maybe scoring the valve stem seal if you get it caught on like the ridges of the valve. But what you cannot skip is lubrication of the valve stem seal. It's very important because if you put it on dry, you have a much higher chance of tearing it. We have these valves that we need to attach the collets to. Collets? Colette is a woman's name, so it's probably collets. The process is rather straightforward. We make sure that everything is attached correctly. We take our valve spring compressor tool. Again, this is a 3D printed piece of kit designed by A46NV. Then we start threading the nuts onto it so that we can get an initial compression here. Okay. Each valve has these 3 ridges, which is where the collet fits into. And the collet is slightly tapered. So when you have both collets in place, this actually bumps up against the plate like it does here. So that's our task, is to compress these valves and put in these collets. I just put a little bit of oil on the valve stem and that helps a bit. Great. So those collets are set. And now I just need to do this for the other ones. Now that all 4 of these valves are secured, I can take off this tool. And there we go. Another set of valves have been positioned correctly. And there we go. All of the exhaust side valves are now clipped in place, and we can begin to do all of the same stuff on the intake side. In fact, man, that transition was terrible. Also, this light went out. The intake side is now done as well. So, it's time to take this back to the garage, where we'll put the rest of the head back together, get it onto the engine block, and start timing it.
Before any of that though, I needed to spend some quality time preparing the engine block for blissful matrimony with the head, which meant a comprehensive cleaning of the mating surfaces.
So, it's time for the engine block and the engine head to come together at last. And for that we have the engine head gasket. But along with the engine head gasket, there is one critical thing that we mustn't forget, and that is to seal the timing case cover to this cylinder block. I will demonstrate. We use Rein's seal. We apply a little bit of a dab here, and a little bit of a dab here. It's important to be very careful, because if you overdo it, then you're gonna wind up with RTV in your oil supply. And then, well, ask Toyota how that goes. Now that that's happened, we don't have a lot of time to act. This is what's called an MLS, a multi-layer steel gasket. Align it with the dowel pins. Make sure that everything is seating correctly. The writing should be facing upwards, although I don't really know how you'd be able to put it on otherwise. It is an asymmetrical engine. And go get your head. Gently feed it in. Okay, we're looking good now. Now that the head is on the block, the next thing to do is, naturally, to put in the cylinder head bolt. And the cylinder head bolts are not really difficult to put in. I mean, it's much the same as taking them out. The problem is that the torque sequence, much like for the rod bearings and the main bearings, requires a rotational torque, which honestly doesn't present an issue, except for a small problem. Last time I was using this dingus, it broke. And while that's a problem that I plan to solve, I don't plan to solve it tonight. So with this extremely high quality transition, let's move to when I do solve it.
Unfortunately, by the time I figured out how to solve this issue, I totally forgot about the transition. Next, it so happened that my good friend Andrew was visiting, and I managed to convince him to join me in the workshop for the weighty task of reattaching the cylinder head.
So just the other day, I decided that I was going to take a look at the lifters before I put them back into the engine. I don't want to have top end noise when I turn the engine on for the first time, and I definitely don't want to tear it all back down again to replace them. So this is an intake lifter. It's not really moving. They're supposed to. They have a spring inside, and they have holes on the outside. And so I decided that I was going to clean them. Let me demonstrate to you how one might be able to do that. You take apart the lifter like so. You take a vice grips, you put it inside this dingus, you attach the vice grip, and you just pull it out. Sometimes it cooperates, most times it doesn't. This is a lot easier when I wasn't on camera. Maybe I don't want it bad enough. There we go. And it comes off. Yeah, that definitely was as easy as I made it look, and not at all a cut of numerous attempts. Once you do take it apart, you get, this is a piston? It's a piston. Yeah, plunger, piston, whatever. In here, there's a ball check valve. This check valve is what allows oil to flow in and out of the lifter as is necessary. The lifter's whole purpose, of course, is to soften the blow of the cam lobes as they rotate, rather than having them hit the springs and the valves directly, which would cause them lots of damage. So you can take this all apart and clean it up pretty nice. If you want it, this will even come apart further. Oh, that broke. Anyway, these lifters are trash. we're putting in new ones. New ones from INA. The whole point of this is that these lifters were not in very good shape. Some of them were collapsed, others were fine, I guess, but who knows what kind of top-end noise we would be experiencing if we were to put it all back together. And what's more, when I took one of these lifters apart to clean it, I lost a little check valve, like the ball that's in there to keep, you know, pressure up. It dropped and it's gone. It will never be seen or heard from again. It's a 2mm ball, so it's gone. This combination of factors led me to make the decision that I did, which is to buy 24 new lifters. I have an audience here today. The audience is about to tell you how they feel about this decision that I've made. What do you think, audience?
What?
Do you think I'm a bit of a goofus? Oh, these are interesting. They're
The design different? That's pretty close.
I'd say that it's close enough to be exactly the same, but I know that INA makes a lot of really good things and they're the same height, which is the important part. When putting lifters in, make sure to put them in the right way. You don't want to put them in upside down. It's not going to do a very good job if you do that. Okay, Bad Lifters. From the album Bad Lifters by the band Bad Lifters. All right, and once again, to put these into the head, we need to utilize magnets. Put the magnets in onto the lifters, make sure that they make contact with both them and the cam tray. All right, let's see if these magnets hold. We're cooking with gas now. Just out of curiosity, do you know how much a cam tray costs for one of these engines?
I looked it up. It was like $600 or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So, yeah, a new one of these trays is about $600. Just out of curiosity, do you know what a cam lifter tray for, say, Chevy 350 costs? It is $38.
Mm-hmm.
Brand new.
Mm-hmm.
Genuine. $38.
Yeah.
Why do we do this to ourselves? Bad lifters. Do you know what level of tomfoolery I went through to make sure that these lifters would all stay, like, would all be correctly labeled with the right...
Oh, where they came out of?
Yeah. It's pretty annoying, to be honest. This engine's gonna get like 3 oil changes in 500 miles. It's gonna be great. Owie! Don't bite. Well, that's the lifters and their trays in. So I guess we put on the head bolts. I'm very afraid of this.
Why?
So I'm gonna keep it real with you, Andrew. This is an M54. M54s have alu-steel blocks. A very disappointing outcome here would be if I were to put in a head bolt, and as I were to tighten it, it stripped. And with this particular engine, that's not a far off distant improbability.
So in hindsight, you should have done the head bolts before the cam trays.
Now that we put the lifters and the lifter tray back in, they're coming right back out. It gives me more opportunity and more space to do a big cry if, for example, something goes wrong with the head bolts. Well, we're back where we started. I'm just so nervous. Like, what if the fucking thing just strips?
I mean, you're worrying about starting to cat here. Like, it'll be fine or it won't. You won't know until you tighten it. So, no sense in worrying until there's a problem.
We're cleaning the surfaces here too before we put the head bolts into the engine, because that's the right thing to do.
Now it was time to do the dull task of cleaning and oiling the head hardware.
You're supposed to cover it in a light coating of oil, so I have a light coating of oil on my glove. The reason that we apply oil to this is so that as the bolt head spins against them, it's able to spin smoothly rather than get caught up and you have accurate torquing. Is that right?
That's correct.
I mean, I'm not an engineer. I don't even know how to spell engineer. And the last one. Now we need to repeat this little song and dance with our head bolts. So they do come oiled, but you need to clean them of that oil and then oil them again. Lightly oil the thread area and slip that bad hombre in, I guess. I don't know why I'm so nervous. I've done this so many times. I just really want this to be done right.
Child is very upset for being on a playground.
I mean, it's probably less about the playground and more about just existence. And to that child, I say, yeah, same. We're running these down by hand rather than with a tool because you want to be able to get a sense for how the threads are.
Just see if anything feels wonky, feels weird. These all feel fine.
That's good news.
There will be no issues.
Okay. So, let's set joining torque. Andrew's holding the instructions here. He's being extremely helpful. So, fourth from the start. First, we're going to do a joining torque of 30 Newton meters. Now it's 90 twice. So that's the first pass done. The threads all feel pretty decent. No hang-ups, no catches, nothing like that. I have to get a new one of these. Or maybe like one of those fancy torque wrenches that beep at you.
Those are big money, but nice.
That's 90. Ready, steady.
Good. Good. There you go. Good, 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 good. There you go. Good, 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 good.
Okay. Woo! Nice. Well, that was easy. We're gonna bring these lifters back. A is Ausgang, which means that this is the exhaust. And Eingang for the intake. Now these are proper lifters. That's good. What do you have to say for yourself?
It's fun.
Yeah.
Something head joke. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Workshop it.
yeah, that's what this is.
It's a workshop.
Yeah.
I said another big thank you to Andrew, and he went back on his way, and on the next day, I set about trying to figure out how to reinstall my camshafts.
And thank you very much for your help. All right, now it's time to put on the camshafts. Before we do that, we have to make sure that when we do put on the camshafts, we're not doing it in a way that makes it impossible or could potentially damage something. So we need to rotate the engine to top dead center and then 45 degrees off, just like we did when we took the camshafts off. Where's the top dead center mark? Let's use the old crank pulley. That's interesting. The newer crank pulley doesn't seem to have top dead center marked. That's fine. So the best practice when you're putting camshafts or other rotating things like that together is, well, to use something that's lubricated. So we're going to be using Permatex Ultra Thick Assembly Lube. You apply it to the lifters and the bearing journals here. It didn't say what flavor this was, but I'm guessing that this is cherry flavored, just because of the color. Now I've thoroughly cleaned this camshaft. And we just put it in just so. Due to some unexpected technical difficulties, please enjoy a few seconds of this pleasant music while I explain. I didn't have a good time putting in the exhaust camshaft. It took a long while, and by the time I figured out what I was doing wrong, my camera was completely dead. So let's pick this up on the next day when I'm doing the intake camshaft. Now, back to the show. What if suddenly this is just gonna be super easy now? Like, I don't even have to struggle with it. I don't even have to fight it. It's just, you know, it just pops in and bam. There we go. That wasn't too bad. Now we gotta turn these through a quarter of a turn at a time. Remembering to check the gaps here on this thrust bearing. That's coming down pretty evenly still. Alright, lovely. Let's get the rest of these caps on and we'll torque everything to spec. The bearing surfaces are now clean. Let's put assembly lube on them and put them in place. I'm so tempted to just try this. Anyway, E7, E3, E5. And that's it. Cams are now in. Next task is to time the engine. First order of business in our timing procedure is to bring the camshafts straight up. Basically, we want these two holes on the ends of the camshafts to be parallel with the head. So take our 24mm wrench and rotate them. Let's get as close as we can. I think that's about as close as we're going to get. Let's also bring our crankshaft back to top dead center. Alright.
Although reinstalling the cams and moving the engine to top dead center was a success, once I stepped back to validate what I was doing, I realized that there was a complication.
Just kidding about that last part. We're not going to be timing the engine right now, even though I very, very much want to. Here's the thing. Timing the engine means putting these camshafts in sync with the crankshaft that's down below. To do that, you need to be able to lock the crankshaft in place. Now, if the engine was in the car, or in a more optimal setup than we have here, I would be able to do that using the flywheel. The flywheel has a slot right here. You put a pin into that, and that prevents the flywheel, and subsequently the crankshaft onto which the flywheel is connected, from moving. And you can then tug all you like here, well, within reason, and the crankshaft won't move, so you can properly align the camshafts. While I could theoretically time the engine, it's really not a best practice to do it this way. And like I've said 1,000 times before, I ain't doing this again. So while the solution to this is relatively straightforward, it is a bit of a pain in the ass because I'm going to have to flip this engine around, put on the oil pump and the oil pan. Then we take the engine off the stand and we put it onto this handy-dandy, very useful pallet. Then I can finally put the flywheel on and we can lock the crankshaft in place. There are theoretically ways that I could get around it. I could probably use the tool that I used to take the crank pulley off to lock that, but I can't really see how that would be very precise. And if it moves and it doesn't work, I'm going to be taking the engine off and doing what I said anyway. So why not save myself the trouble, the hassle, and the hours and hours of deep sobbing once I've messed it up, and just do it right the first time. Anyway, so that's the plan, but it's pretty late and I have had a very long day, and so I'm not going to do that tonight. But I'll probably be back tomorrow and, do the thing.
This new plan in hand, I needed now to clean and install the oil pump and oil pan onto the rebuilt engine.
Alright, it's time to clean the oil pump. Let's take this apart and see what magical treasures lie within. It's our pickup tube detached. And there's this part here, which we need some snap ring pliers to get out. Well, oh my God! So that landed on top of the light. My goal here is to just make sure that nothing is scarred or broken or anything like that. There he is. The final plunger came out. I had a brush just today that I was using to gently clean my flywheel, and it's gone. I couldn't find something earlier today, and so I got so frustrated that I organized the entire shop. Look. It's a lot better than it was. I have a new shelf, it's got things on it, but I can't find the stupid brush now. Ah! I'm gonna go spray this down with solvent. Oh yay, I found the brush. So I'm gonna call this done. Is this perfect? No. But you know why this engine's not yet together and in the car? because I keep getting slowed down by wanting things to be perfect. So this is good. Anyone who ever looks at this will say, this is good. Now let's clean the oil pressure regulator, make sure that it's lubricated and properly situated back into place. Sorry about that. I had to switch to a different device because I ran out of space on my camera's memory card and I don't have another memory card with me. That means that we have spent at least 256 gigabytes making this. It's probably much more. We lubricate the piston of the oil pressure regulator and we stick him back in there. Then we have the spring. We can lubricate that as well. We're not shy about the oil then, are we? Then we have our cap. All right, so that's properly cleaned now, lubricated. We stick it in there. And let's see if we can get this circlip on without it shooting somewhere. Basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to push this piston down and let go of this clip. Oh, it's worked. Nice. I should try to do that while talking more, I guess. When you put this guy in, this little dimple should be facing outwards. Then we have our gear. And over the top of that, I don't know what the torque is, but I'll just run them down. That is a cleaned oil pump. It's really quite simple. There's nothing to it, as you saw. Now we're ready to put this back into the engine, and then we can close it finally up with the oil pan. These two parts were like $4 total, and so I decided to get them. We're just going to make sure that everything that secures the oil pressure regulator is in good order, and then we'll put it back in. There we go. We're going to replace this O-ring. The old one is still fairly pliable, but you know, we're already in here. And there we go. And in there you go. And now we take our new snap ring. All right, that's done. Now let's torque these up. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, this oil pickup tube also has an O-ring here, which we have a new one of. Here's our new O-ring for the pickup tube, straight from our friends at BMW. And just know that when I say our friends at BMW, I don't mean that BMW knows who I am. I mean just like the local boys at the dealer. I'm pretty friendly with them. This is very, very hard and just a moment away from turning into plastic, honestly. Whereas this one is much more pliable. Some oil, and that goes on. Fantastic. With that in place, let's reinstall the pickup tube. Now I'm just being particular, you know. Let's get the sprocket on. We have an old sprocket here from the yard engine. We have the sprocket from the X5's original engine. But I'm not using any of those. Because predictably, I'm the most extra person in the world. And we have a brand new sprocket from BMW. Look at that. It's nice and shiny, that. Oh. These teeth do have a chamfer difference. If you take a look here, you'll see that the sides of these are not, they're not the same. It's not even. Let's look at the old ones. Okay, so the old one, this one is the same way. The flat side very clearly has a ghost mark from the oil pump nut, whereas this smaller ghost mark is made by this bit at the end of the oil pump. So with that, I'm going to say that that's what we're going to do for the reassembly. So flat side out. This is ready to go back in the car. I do want to Loctite this, but I want to make sure that everything fits together correctly. Like, the chain goes over this happily and everything like that. Then I'll take this off, put some Loctite on it, and then we'll torque it. Oh man, I'm so scared. I don't like the way that this looks at all. If for some reason this falls off the stand right now, it's over. That's it. I'm giving up. That's the dowel coming out. Dowel goes back in, and I think we did it. Nice. All right, so oil pump is in place. Now we just have to, you know, use the bolts to attach it. Great. Now we can torque this guy. This is what we want, thread locker blue. We're not going crazy with it. We're just adding enough for it to work. Now I need to find the bolts that hold this baffle in. Alrighty, well, here's the cleaned oil pan. I understand that it's not clean to the point where one might confuse it with a new one, but it represents a progress compared to what it was. Now I'm gonna just blow it out with my blowgun, and then we'll put on the oil pan gasket, and then the oil pan, flip this over, and take it off of the engine stand. Here's our new oil pan gasket from Victor Rines. Victor was kind enough to send me, what was that? Oh, that's not a guy? Oh, okay. No, I've used Rines parts before. They're usually pretty good. So I don't generally have any concerns as it relates to fitment or quality. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna set the oil pan gasket in place with zip ties. We're gonna put on the rear main seal before we put on the oil pan because the oil pan connects to it. New rear main seal kit from BMW. It comes with a gasket, which we need to make sure it aligns. Is it that way? It sure is. Okay, so the gasket goes on. If you buy a new rear main seal kit from BMW, it'll come with this plastic bushing. This bushing is actually part of this new updated design for the rear main seal. The old rear main seals had a spring within the main seal itself. We just negotiate our path here. Slide it over the dowels. Make sure it sits firmly. Then we remove the bushing. That's it. And now we have a new rear main seal. Let's install the bolts. These two big ones go on the side here, and they come with some Loctite. And the small ones go around the outside. These top ones are easy to torque while the engine's on a stand. Now we apply some sealant between these surfaces here and put on the oil pan. My special match applicator has helped me apply RCV tube to the two seams between the engine block and the rear main seal and the front timing case. Is there a better applicator? I'm not sure. With that done, the clock is ticking now, so let's get going. That's good. So, oil pan is back in. Oil pump is back in. Let's see. All the gaskets are on. The rear main seal is on. Engine's off the stand, so we can start timing it. I think that deserves a beer. I knew that I was going to get something done, and I felt that it merited an achievement. And it has.
With that though, I also know how many hours of video I have already shot for this episode. And while my intention was to make one final episode of me putting the engine back together and then subsequently into the car, that's not happening. It's not happening. I already have like 400 gigabytes of video that I've shot for this, and I've spent like 15 hours editing, and there's still already so much footage. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit pause for here, and I mean, look where we are. We're very close. Like this engine, it needs to be timed, and it goes into the car, and then there's everything else that's associated with that. But like that, I'm pretty sure I can do in one episode. Either way, thank you so much for sticking with me here and being on this channel and watching these stupid videos and giving your support. So I really appreciate it. It's my pleasure and honor to make stupid videos for you. And so thank you very much for watching. If you like this series and you like to watch more, I invite you to go do that. And I think it's here or it's here, whatever. There's more stuff. You should follow the channel on Instagram because it's a lot easier for me to go and post it, which I do, though not as frequently. And of course, a huge thank you to my Patreon subscribers. This one's for you. I really appreciate the financial support that you provide for this channel, which allows me to, well, offset some of the costs that, say, rebuilding a 20-year-old BMW's engine and then putting it back in costs. So I appreciate that. Thank you. And so I guess that's it. One final thank you for watching. My name is Sam. This is the Gray Lady. This is almost done. And this is Skelly's Garage. We'll see you next time.